What is going to be the future of learning? I do have a plan, but in order for me to tell you what that plan is, I need to tell you a little story which kind of sets the stage. I tried to look at where did the kind of learning we do in schools, where did it come from? And you can look far back into the past, but if you look at present-day schooling the way it is, it's quite easy to figure out where it came from. It came from about 300 years ago. And it came from the last and the biggest of the empires on this planet. Imagine trying to run the show, trying to run the entire planet without computers, without telephones, with data handwritten on pieces of paper and traveling by ships. But the Victorians actually did it. What they did was amazing. They created a global computer made up of people. It's still with us today. It's called the bureaucratic administrative machine. In order to have that machine running, you need lots and lots of people. They made another machine to produce those people. The school. The schools would produce the people who would then become parts of the bureaucratic administrative machine. They must be identical to each other. They must know three things. They must have good handwriting, because the data is handwritten. They must be able to read, and they must be able to do multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction in their head. They must be so identical that you could pick one up from New Zealand and ship them to Canada, and he would be instantly functional. The Victorians were great engineers. They engineered a system that was so robust that is still with us today, continuously producing identical people for a machine that no longer exists. The empire's gone. So what are we doing with that design that produces these identical people? And what are we going to do next, if we ever are going to do anything else with it? So that's a pretty strong comment there. I said, schools as we know them now, they're obsolete. I'm not saying they're broken. It's quite fashionable to say that the education system's broken. It's not broken. It's wonderfully constructed. It's just that we don't need it anymore. It's outdated. What's the kind of jobs that we have today? Well, the clerks are the computers. They're there in thousands in every office. And you have people who guide those computers to do their clerical jobs. Those people don't need to be able to write beautifully by hand. They don't need to be able to multiply numbers in their heads. They do need to be able to read. In fact, they need to be able to read discerningly. Well, that's today. But we don't even know what the jobs of the future are going to look like. We know that people will work from wherever they want, whenever they want, in whatever way they want. How is present-day schooling going to prepare them for that world? Well, I bumped into this whole thing completely by accident. I used to teach people how to write computer programs in New Delhi 14 years ago. And right next to where I used to work, there was a slum. And I used to think, how on earth are those kids ever going to learn to write computer programs? Or should they not? At the same time, we also had lots of parents, rich people, who had computers, and who used to tell me, my son, I think he's gifted, because he does wonderful things with computers. And my daughter, surely she's extra intelligent, and so on. So I suddenly figured that how come all the rich people are having these extraordinary gifted children? What did the poor do wrong? I made a hole in the boundary wall of the slum next to my office, I stuck a computer inside it just to see what would happen if I gave a computer to children who never would have one, didn't know any English, didn't know what the internet was. The children came running in. It was 3 feet off the ground, and they said, "What is this?" And I said, "Yeah, but it's I don't know." So they said, "Why have you put it there?" I said, "Just like that." And they said, "Can we touch it?" I said, "If you wish to." And I went away. About 8 hours later, we found them browsing and teaching each other how to browse. So I said, "But that's impossible, because how is it possible? They don't know anything." My colleagues said, "No, it's a simple solution. One of your students must have been passing by, showed them how to use the mouse." So I said, "Yeah, that's possible." So I repeated the experiment. I went 300 miles out of Delhi into a really remote village where the chances of a passing software development engineer was very little. I repeated the experiment there. There was no place to stay, so I stuck my computer in, I went away, came back after a couple of months, found kids playing games on it. When they saw me, they said, "We want a faster processor and a better mouse." So I said, "How on earth do you know all this?" And they said something very interesting to me. In an irritated voice, they said, "You've given us a machine that works only in English, so we had to teach ourselves English in order to use it." So, that's the first time as a teacher that I heard the word "teach ourselves" said so casually. Here's a short glimpse from those years. That's the first day at the Hole in the Wall. On your right is an 8-year-old. To his left is his student. She is 6, and he's teaching her how to browse. Then on to the, other parts of the country. I repeated this over and over again, getting exactly the same results everywhere. An 8-year-old telling his elder sister what to do. And finally, a girl explaining in Marathi what it is, and said, "There's a processor inside." So I started publishing. I published everywhere. I wrote down and measured everything, and I said, in 9 months, a group of children left alone with a computer in any language would reach the same standard as an office secretary in the West. I'd seen it happen over and over and over again. But I was curious to know what else would they do if they could do this much. I started experimenting with other subjects. Among them, for example, pronunciation. There's one community of children in southern India whose English pronunciation was really bad. And they needed good pronunciation because that would improve their jobs. I gave them a speech-to-text engine in a computer. And I said, "Keep talking into it until it types what you say." Okay. They did that, and watched a little bit of this.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
The reason I end it with that, the face of this young lady over there is because I suspect many of you know her. She's now joined a call center in Hyderabad and may have tortured you about your credit card bills. in a very clear English accent. So then people said, "Well, how far will it go? Where does it stop?" I decided I would destroy my own argument by creating an absurd proposition. I made a hypothesis, a ridiculous hypothesis. Tamil is a South Indian language, and I said, can Tamil-speaking children in a South Indian village learn the biotechnology of DNA replication in English from a street-side computer? And I said, I'll measure them, they'll get a 0. I'll spend a couple of months, I'll leave it for a couple of months, I'll go back, they'll get another 0. I'll go back to the lab and say, we need teachers. I found a village, it was called Kali Kuppam in southern India. I put in hole-in-the-wall computers there, downloaded all kinds of stuff from the internet about DNA replication, most of which I didn't understand. The children came rushing and said, what's all this? So I said, it's very topical, very important. It's all in English. So they said, how can we understand such big English words and diagrams and chemistry? So by now, I had developed a new pedagogical method, so I applied that. I said, I haven't the foggiest idea. and, and anyway, I'm going away. So I left them for a couple of months. They'd got a 0. I gave them a test. I came back after 2 months, and the children trooped in and said, we've understood nothing. So I said, well, I mean, what did I expect? So I said, okay, but how long did it take you before you decided that you can't understand anything? So they said, we haven't given up. We look at it every single day. So I said, what? You don't understand these screens, and you keep staring at it for 2 months. What for? So a little girl, who you'll see just now, she raised her hand, and she says to me in broken Tamil and English, she said, well, apart from the fact that improper replication of the DNA molecule causes disease, we haven't understood anything else. So I tested them. I got an educational impossibility, 0 to 30% in 2 months in the tropical heat with a computer under the tree in a language that they didn't know, doing something that's a decade ahead of their time. Absurd. But I had to follow the Victorian norm. 30% is a fail. How do I get them to pass? I have to get them 20 more marks. I couldn't find a teacher. What I did find was a friend that they had, a 22-year-old girl who was an accountant, and she played with them all the time. So I asked this girl, can you help them? So she says, absolutely not. I didn't have science in school. I have no idea what they're doing under that tree all day long. I can't help you. I said, I'll tell you what, use the method of the grandmother. So she says, what's that? I said, stand behind them. Whenever they do anything, you just say, well, wow, I mean, how did you do that? What's the next page? Gosh, when I was your age, I could have never done that. I mean, you know what grannies do. So she did that for 2 more months. The scores jumped to 50%. Kalikuppam had caught up with my control school in New Delhi, a rich private school with a trained biotechnology teacher. When I saw that graph, I knew there is a way to level the playing field. Here's Kalikuppam.
Neuron cell death and communication. Neuron.
I got the camera angle wrong in that one. It's just amateur stuff. But what she was saying, as you could make out, was about neurons. But her hands were like that, and she was saying neurons communicate at 12. So what are jobs going to be like? Well, we know what they're like today. What's learning going to be like? We know what it's like today, children poring over with their mobile phones on the one hand, and then reluctantly going to school to pick up their books with the other hand. What will it be tomorrow? Could it be that we don't need to go to school at all? Could it be that at the point in time when you need to know something, you can find out in 2 minutes? Could it be a devastating question, a question that was framed for me by Nicholas Negroponte? Could it be that we are heading towards, or maybe in, a future when knowing is obsolete? But that's terrible. We are Homo sapiens. Knowing, that's what distinguishes us from the apes. But look at it this way. It took nature 100 million years to make the ape stand up and become Homo sapiens. It took us only 10,000 to make knowing obsolete. What an achievement that is. But we have to integrate that into our own future. Encouragement seems to be the key. If you look at Kuppam, if you look at all of the experiments that I did, it was simply saying, wow, saluting learning. There is evidence from neuroscience. The reptilian part of our brain, which sits in the center of our brain, when it's threatened, it shuts down everything else. It shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the parts which learn. It shuts all of that down. Punishment and examinations are seen as threats. We take our children, we make them shut their brains down, and then we say, perform. Why did they create a system like that? Because it was needed. There was an age, in the age of empires, when you needed those people who can survive under threat. When you're standing in a trench all alone, if you could have survived, you're okay, you passed. If you didn't, you failed. But the age of empires is gone. What happens to creativity in our age? We need to shift that balance back from threat to pleasure. I came back to England looking for British grandmothers. I put out notices in papers saying, if you're a British grandmother, if you have broadband and a web camera, can you give me 1 hour of your time per week for free? I got 200 in the first 2 weeks. I know more British grandmothers than anyone in the universe. They're called the granny cloud. The granny cloud sits on the internet. If there's a child in trouble, we beam a gran. She goes on over Skype and she sorts things out. I've seen them do it from a village called Diggles in northwestern England, deep inside a village in Tamil Nadu, India, 6,000 miles away. She does it with only one age-old gesture. Okay. Watch this.
You can't catch me. You say it. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man. Well done. Very good.
So what's happening here? I think what we need to look at is we need to look at learning as the product of educational self-organization. If you allow the educational process to self-organize, then learning emerges. It's not about making learning happen, it's about letting it happen. The teacher sets the process in motion, and then she stands back in awe and watches as learning happens. I think that's what all this is pointing at. But how will we know? How will we come to know? Well, I intend to build these self-organized learning environments. They are basically broadband, collaboration, and encouragement put together. I've tried this in many, many schools. That's being tried all over the world, and teachers sort of stand back and say, it just happens by itself? And I said, yeah, it happens by itself. How did you know that? And I said, you won't believe the children who told me and where they're from. Here's a soul in action. This one is in England. He maintains law and order. Because remember, there's no teacher around. Australia.
Giving it a net positive or negative electrical charge. The net charge on an ion is equal to the number of protons in the ion minus the number of electrons.
A decade ahead of our time. So souls, I think we need a curriculum of big questions. You already heard about that. You know what that means. There was a time when Stone Age men and women used to sit and look up at the sky and say, what are those twinkling lights? They built the first curriculum. But we've lost sight of that wondrous questions. We've brought it down to the tangent of an angle. But that's not sexy enough. The way you would put it to a 9-year-old is to say, if a meteorite was coming to hit the Earth, how would you figure out if it was going to or not? And if he says, well, what? How? You say there's a magic word, it's called the tangent of an angle, and leave him alone. He'll figure it out. So here are a couple of images from souls. I've tried incredible questions. When did the world begin? How will it end? To 9-year-olds. This one's about what happens to the air we breathe. This is done by children without the help of any teacher. The teacher only raises the question and then stands back and admires the answer. So, what's my wish? My wish is that we design the future of learning. We don't want to be spare parts for a great human computer, do we? So we need to design a future for learning. And I've got to, hang on, I've got to get this wording exactly right, because, it's very important. My wish is to help design a future of learning by supporting children all over the world to tap into their wonder and their ability to work together. Help me build this school. It will be called the School in the Cloud. It'll be a school where children go on these intellectual adventures driven by the big questions which their mediators put in. The way I want to do this is to build a facility where I can study this. It's a facility which is practically unmanned. There's only one granny who manages health and safety. The rest of it's from the cloud. The lights are turned on and off by the cloud, etc., etc. Everything's done from the cloud. But I want you for another purpose. You can do self-organized learning environments at home, in the school, outside of school, in clubs. It's very easy to do. There's a great document produced by TED which tells you how to do it. If you would please do it across all 5 continents and send me the data, then I'll put it all together, move it into the School of Clouds, and create the future of learning. That's my wish. And just one last thing, I'll take you to the top of the Himalayas. At 12,000 feet, where the air is thin, I once built 2 hole-in-the-wall computers. And the children flocked there. There was this little girl who was following me around. And I said to her, I want to give a computer to everybody, every child. I don't know, what should I do? And I was trying to take a picture of her, quietly. She suddenly raised her hand like this and said to me, "Get on with it." I think it was good advice. I'll follow her advice. I'll stop talking. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Wow. The last time I stood on a TED main stage was 20-something February 2013, and it was in Long Beach, California. And TED gave me their prize at that point in time, $1 million. I thought they would put it in my bank account, but they didn't actually. They gave it to the university. But anyhow, here I am again on a TED main stage. I spent the $1 million. Okay? I'll tell you what happened next. I thought I'd give you a report on what I did with the money and where we are at this point in time. It's not all gone, there's just a little bit left. When TED gave me the prize, they also gave another prize, a smaller one, to Sundance Institute to make a documentary on the whole project. The documentary will be called The School in the Cloud. At the moment, the documentary is not finished, but I got hold of a trailer, and I thought you might enjoy watching that. What is the future of learning? Could it be that we are heading towards, or maybe in, a future when knowing is obsolete? Could it be that we don't need to go to school at all? Could it be that at the point in time when you need to know something, you can find out in 2 minutes? My wish is to build a facility where children go on these intellectual adventures driven by the big questions which their mediators put in. It's a facility which is practically unmanned. It will be called the School in the cloud.
আর ওকে মানুষ করার ইচ্ছা খুব, কিন্তু সেরকমভাবে আমরা পারছি কই। এখানে যে স্কুল,
Good teachers don't go to remote places. The remoter you get, the worse primary education becomes. I don't know how to build a school in the cloud because I've never built one. So I'm trying to figure out a design which, really speaking, belongs to children and is run by children. So that's what's going on. It's a great big experiment. Schools as we know them now, they're outdated.
As soon as I started doing it and seeing the buzz and the enjoyment of the kids, it made me look at my lessons differently and the role of a teacher differently, less talking at the front and more handing it over to the children.
Like not made of, but it's like a bread.
I really like it because it's independent and you get to work with your friends.
Korakati may or may not be different from the schools of England. That's what we are going to look for. The idea is to have a complete glass front to a building here and a large screen for a full-size Skyped-in mediator.
ইন্টারনেট বসানো থাকবে, এই লন্ডন থেকে কম্পিউটারের মাধ্যমে এখানে পড়ানো হবে।
All I ever really wanted to know about computers was how to turn them off. Hi! Hello, Raveen. Hello, Ajay. How nice to see you. Look what I made. Can you see what this is?
সব জায়গায় প্রায় ইংরেজির, আমি ছোটবেলা থেকে যদি শিখি তাহলে আমার বড় হলে তখন আরো ভালোভাবে শিখতে পারবো।
You help a child to the point where if he wants to know something, he knows where to look for it and how to look for it.
The more affluent children have people who will help them to learn anyway. But it's children in desolate areas who really desperately need to know how to learn. And I know that the internet does that. Learning itself is actually an emergent phenomenon, like a hive or like a thunderstorm. It's not about making learning happen, it's about letting it happen. I made a project. I made a project for TED. The way it works is that they tell you what will you do with the money if you get it. So I made out a project. The project was that I would build 7 laboratories, 7 learning laboratories. 5 of them would be in India and 2 would be in England. What sort of labs? Well, for that, you need to know what happened before, which I won't go over, but what happened in the 15 years before the TED Prize was that I was able to figure out something which all of you know and all of you can figure out for yourselves in about 2 minutes, which is that if you have a question, you no longer need to ask a human being for an answer. There's something out there which can tell you what the answer is. What is it out there? Well, the internet, of course, we call it the cloud. To me, it's the first non-human, conscious and intelligent entity that we have encountered. We always thought that aliens will land from other planets and they'll be green with long legs and round eyes. It turned out it was not going to be like that. The alien entity is made up of 4 billion people. But it is not a person. It's a thing. You can ask that thing anything, and it tells you what you want to know. Given that situation, what happens to children and what happens to education? Well, there are reports from all around the world that children are not asking questions to people. Or at least if they have to ask a question to a person, they do that after they have asked their phones. Children don't want to learn how to multiply, divide, add, and subtract because they say they already know how to do that. It's done with phones. Children don't want to particularly to learn to read because they say there are things that can read out things to them, even if they don't know how to read. At the moment, they don't like to write by hand because they want to know why they should learn how to write by hand. Will they ever do it in the rest of their lives? So what happens in a world where reading, writing, and arithmetic are treated in such a cavalier manner? I wanted to experiment with that world. The idea was to create facilities for children which has the internet, and where children can go in and do what they like without any supervision or without any teachers. We could have presence there, but it would come out of the internet over Skype from somewhere, if the children wanted to. I work with children in the age group of about 8 to 12 or 13 years old, and they love speaking to adults over Skype, particularly adults who, like retired school teachers and things like that. And I asked them, so why do you like this so much? Do you like it? They said, yes, we love it. Why do you like it so much? They said, you know what? We can switch them off. What I did after February 2013 was to first look for places and then start building. The 7 labs are built to cover from the really remote area, such as areas without electricity, without healthcare, without schooling, nothing really, just the wild, through to middle-class England, and all the ones in between. So the 7 have all been built now. I finished opening the last one just this month. The very first one was opened November 2013, the same year that I got the prize. You see over there a picture of that lab. It's in a town called Killingworth, England. It's actually situated inside a school. The school is called George Stephenson High School. It's very close to George Stephenson's home, the guy who built the first working steam engine. In Killingworth, this is a room. It just looks like a nice lounge with computers and an Xbox. And the teachers, when I built it, they said, Sugata, this is a bit too much. Do you have any idea of what they're going to do with that Xbox? They're going to do nothing else except play with the Xbox. So I said, well, that's our challenge, isn't it? If you've gone in there to teach geography and the students are playing with the Xbox, it means geography is more boring than the Xbox. Then we should relook at geography, chuck it from the curriculum, or put it into the Xbox somehow. You can't tell the children, we'll take away your Xbox and we'll put you into school to do other things. That's not the right way to engage children's attention. So here it is, a picture of what happens in there. As you can see, there are 5 children in the corner researching something or the other, and there's one on the Xbox. If you give them something interesting enough to do, they don't actually play Xbox all the time. It was our misconception. Here's more of Killingworth. What they do in there is called a self-organized learning environment. It's very simple. Take 5 computers, take 20 children, put them in there, ask them a question. The question has to be an interesting one, what we call a big question. What's a big question? Well, it can be all kinds, but let me give you an example. A big question could be, can trees think? Okay. If you give that question to children, they'll first sort of mutter with these trees. No, they can't. Yes, maybe they can. I don't know. And then you just leave them alone. And you say, well, I don't know the answer either, but why don't we look for it? And this will happen, what you see on the screen over there. And about 30 or 40 minutes later, they'll come back to you. And they'll come back not with childish observations. They'll come back with the nature of thought. They'll come back with the latest advances in biology, etc. That's called a self-organized learning environment. Here's one that we did in Kalkaji, New Delhi. It has on the wall a Skyped-in mediator, as you can see, and it's a girls' school. The girls couldn't speak any English to start with. We opened it in February 2014. I put in a team of observers to measure their beginning levels of English, which was close to 0. And then I said, we will measure every 2 months or so. After about 3 days, I was talking to this mediator that you see on the screen over Skype, and I was asking her, how's it going there? So she said, oh, very nice. Those girls are really nice. One of them said to me, when are you coming next? So I said, what? In what language did she say that? And the mediator said, in English. So when I sent my research team in after a month to measure the level, she reported that it's too late. It's done already. I've never seen anything happen so quickly, so I went to Delhi to ask the girls. I said, how did you do that so fast? Well, they gave me an answer which was quite astonishing. They said, you know that woman who comes on the TV screen, she doesn't understand anything other than English. It's as simple as that. This is a little town called Newton Aycliffe in England. County Durham, if you remember the map, it's in the northeast. This school is called Greenfields, and we have a school in the cloud there. What they've done is they've made one of their walls glass. On the other side is a green, typical English green countryside. Inside, they've put in AstroTurf, so that when you enter the room, suddenly you feel as though you're outside because of the turf merging in. And they've put park benches and gas lamps and things like that, and a few computers scattered in there. So the children come into that room, and when you leave them alone, by the way, when you do a self-organized learning environment, you don't stay there. You, the teacher, don't stay there. You go out. So you start the session, and you go out, and from the other side, which is also glass, you can observe them. Anyhow, once, very recently in Greenfields, a group of 8-year-olds were sent into the room by their teacher. And the teacher said, and we often do this in Souls, we say to the children, for the next 45 minutes, I can't talk to you, you can't talk to me. There's no communication. You're on your own. And there's the big question. So she did that. And these 8-year-olds sort of went and they're doing things. After a while, remember what she had said, you can't talk to me and I can't talk to you. After a little while, one of them came up to the glass window and he had a piece of paper in his hand and he held it up. On it was scrawled the words, help, we are stuck. She didn't say you can't communicate with me, she said you can't talk to me. Okay, I thought that was clever thinking. Here's another view of Greenfields. Another one. Chandrakona in Bengal. It's a pretty remote area. If you can think of the map of India, think of the eastern side, the side that point or is close to Burma and Thailand. This is somewhere there. In Chandrakona, we have this structure, and we built a school in the cloud. The parents came there,
they're all farmers. And they said, what are we supposed to do here? They said, you're supposed to send your children here. So they said, what for? So I said, they'll learn things here. They pointed to the computers and said, from those TV screens. I said, they're not TVs, they're computers. They said, well, isn't that the same thing? I said, no, not quite. And they said, who will teach them? I said, they will teach themselves. How can they? I said, they'll use the internet. What's the internet? Where do you go from there? This is what it looks like inside. If you can see it, you'll see at the far end an Australian gentleman who talks to the children. I hate to think of what will happen to their accents, but otherwise they love him. In Chandrakona, 3 months later, there's a tall, slim, young girl there. So she was standing around. I had visited. She said, we really love this place. So I said, for what? So she said, you can find out all sorts of things here. I said, like what? What are you finding out now, today? She said, we were taught in school that plants are green because they have chlorophyll. And they have chlorophyll because they process light in order to make energy. I've come here to find out why chlorophyll has to be green and not blue or yellow or red. Do you know? I said, no. I have no idea why it has to be green. She said, okay, we'll figure it out. 3 months. That's a view of the inside again. And here is our most remote area. It's called Korakati. It's also eastern India. It's where the Ganges meets the sea. It has nothing there. There's no electricity, no healthcare, no schools. I won't say nothing. They have Bengal tigers and the hooded cobra. And they have lots of children. It took some building, but I built that one. It's solar powered. It has a tower, which is 45 feet high. I couldn't get the internet. I had a receiver, kept raising it on bamboo poles. At 45 feet above ground, we got 8 megabit per second, 3G. So 3G met the Stone Age in there. In Chandrakona, the sessions are intermittent because of all sorts of problems. The cabling runs on the ground, the Ethernet cables which connect all the computers together. If you've seen those cables, they're kind of cream-colored. I have to remove them and lift them up somewhere because there is a very pale, thin snake which can change its color to the color of the Ethernet cable and sleeps there. Okay, a bit of a strange problem. You don't get these problems in schools usually. The internet comes and goes. The children walk for 3 miles, come to the school and find there's no internet and walk back 3 miles. Naturally, they are not very happy about it. But in the middle of all of this, what they do is that they find games, download them, and play them. Somehow, they're able to get up to that point. I asked them what a web page was quite recently, and they thought for a while, and they said, it's made by someone who is not here, someone very far away, who sends it somehow over those things which look like the cream-colored snakes. This is the latest of the areas. I don't have a picture of it. It's a hexagonal. It's our best structure. And in there, the studies are just beginning Took a long time to build. It cost close to $1 million. But there are 1,000 children, 1,000 very interesting children added to the cloud. Thank you.